the Diocese of Baton Rouge. The story of the faith in this region began with the labors of French missionary priests, was nurtured by holy bishops, priests, and nuns, and carries on today under the leadership of its current apostle, Bishop Michael Duca.
For myself, my hope is to be just a good bishop, to be a good bishop to the people, to help lead them to Christ and leave the diocese more alive than I found it.
This is the story of the bishops of America, the shepherds of the past and the shepherds of today, who through their callings and ministry carry the church into the future. It's also the story of their parish, their church, the Cathedral. This is The Chair, an exploration of what it means to be an apostle in America. On the banks of the Mississippi River, just north of Louisiana's coastal plains, is the city of Baton Rouge, sea city of the Diocese of Baton Rouge.
Baton Rouge now is about 20% Catholic, okay? The ethos of Catholicism is stronger down, even though this is not as Catholic as New Orleans. It still has an ethos about it that makes the Catholic Church have a greater presence, that is very much a celebratory kind of spirit, very communal, very much respectful of their neighbor, very much a kind of free spirit kind of part. Those are all mixed into kind of the culture I'm experiencing here as I get to know the people.
Louisiana was home to various indigenous tribes for thousands of years. In 1699, the French explorer Pierre Le Moyne d'Iberville discovered the area, and he referred to it as Red Stick, or in French, Baton Rouge, after reddened poles erected by Indians to designate hunting boundaries.
In 1763, the French ceded this area to the Spanish Empire in the Treaty of Paris. This area would remain under Spanish control until 1803, when it briefly then returns to the French before Napoleon sells Louisiana to the United States. In 1792, a year before the founding of the Diocese of Louisiana in the Floridas, King Carlos IV of Spain founded the parish of Our Lady of Sorrows.
The first Catholic church, Our Lady of Sorrows, was founded in 1792, and its first pastor, Father Burke, who was Irish, was able to communicate with his congregation in English, Spanish, and French.
One of the most storied figures in the history of Catholicism in Louisiana was Bishop Duca. Born in 1766, he studied for the priesthood in Paris. But when the French Revolution arrived with all of its violence and anti-clericalism, he was forced to leave France for Spain before eventually coming to the New World.
In the 1790s, he goes to Baltimore and joins the Sulpicians at St. Mary's. Later on, he's appointed president of Georgetown College, which is now Georgetown University. He gave tireless energy to financing the Baltimore Cathedral and was instrumental in actually selecting the site. He also was a bishop who had served as an advisor to Elizabeth Ann Seton in the founding of her Order of the Sisters of Charity.
Father Duberg arrived in Louisiana in 1812 to serve as the apostolic administrator of Louisiana and the two Floridas, of which he becomes bishop the following year. And during a visit to his native France to recruit religious to serve in Louisiana, he meets Madeleine Sophie, the foundress of the Sisters of the Sacred Heart, and Rose Philippine Duchesne, one of her most zealous sisters, both of whom have been named saints. Duchesne would follow Duberg to America, where she became famous for her missionary work in Louisiana and beyond. Bishop Duberg left Louisiana in 1826 to become a bishop in France, but his legacy in building up the church in this region still exists to this day. The area of Baton Rouge will remain part of the Diocese and then Archdiocese of New Orleans for many years, sharing in the rich culture of faith that characterizes southern Louisiana.
Down here, there's a unique culture built around the Acadian or the Cajun culture. Also, the great mixture of people here. You think of you talk about the French Quarter, that this was the Louisiana Purchase from the French, but actually it's more Spanish. So the architecture in the French Quarter is actually Spanish architecture. So there's Spanish, there's French, there's the Cajuns, the Acadians that came down that were received in their exile. You also then have the African American. You have Native Americans, quite a bit of Native Americans through this area. You have the Italian and immigrant populations that came through Louisiana. All that mixes into this great kind of gumbo, they oftentimes say, where all the flavors mix together.
The first half of the 20th century sees a rise in industry and politics and society. And to meet the growing needs of the Catholic population, Pope John XXIII establishes the diocese in 1961 and appoints Bishop Robert Tracy as its first bishop. St. Joseph's Church becomes the first cathedral.
Robert Tracy attended the Second Vatican Council, and on October 24th, 1963, he addressed the council in the name of his fellow American bishops on the subject of racial equality. He was a champion of the council's reforms and encouraged greater participation by the laity in the life of the church. One of the things that has made the Diocese of Baton Rouge a very important diocese in the South, but in the United States as a whole, is that since 1849, Baton Rouge has been the capital of the state of Louisiana. The bishops of the young diocese, therefore, have seen it as their responsibility to use their voice to speak out on issues that have great significance to their flock.
This is one of those things that tricks people up. What's the capital of Louisiana? You want to say New Orleans, but it's Baton Rouge. And we have someone that represents us in the day-to-day workings of the capital. And we involve ourselves in key issues as best we can in order to inform them of our teachings and our beliefs to hopefully shape the conversation.
Since its founding as a diocese, the Cathedral of St. Joseph's has been the mother church and the center of liturgical prayer for the Catholics of Baton Rouge. The parish was first founded in 1792 as Our Lady of Sorrows, but its name changed to St. Joseph in 1812. The current church building was begun in 1853. Under the diocese's first bishop, Bishop Tracy, the cathedral underwent significant renovations in order to better conform the building to the reforms of the Second Vatican Council.
So as you approach the Cathedral of St. Joseph in Baton Rouge, you're immediately welcomed by a large statue of St. Joseph who adorns the facade. As you enter, you also see a beautiful image of St. Joseph in stained glass in the choir loft. And surrounding the church, kind of encircling the nave, there are images of St. Joseph within the life of his adopted son, Jesus.
Here in this church, it's the crucifix that I like, but I particularly like it. And I like the fact that it's so imposing in a sense. It is, we preach Christ crucified. And so that draws my eye, obviously. You can't help but draw your eye. But it's something that makes me feel inspired and something that I just enjoy gazing upon. If you really want to know how good a church is, go when it's full of people. The most important thing I see is the people. I mean, that's what makes a church come alive. Go when they're having Mass. Go when it's alive. Some places that don't feel very good when you're alone come alive when they're full of people, and the people give life to it. And that's the thing that I see when I'm here. I don't really, the beautiful windows and all that kind of lends a certain kind of ambiance, but it's in the people of God that gives me my greatest joy.
If you walk down the main aisle in the nave and then turn around, you'll see two emblems adorning the choir loft. And these are IHS and an image of a pelican, actually. First of all, the monogram IHS is a reference to Jesus' name in Greek, Jesus. So it's kind of the glorification of the holy name of Jesus. And then we have the pelican, if you're looking back at the choir loft to the right. And the pelican is an image for Christ. The pelican is a bird known to peck at its own breast until blood comes out. It needs to feed its young quite desperately, and the young will actually feed from the blood of the pelican. So this image of the self-sacrifice of the pelican is associated deeply with Christ within Christian iconography.
Every cathedral is important to the diocese. It's the visible witness of our unity. The chair, the bishop's chair, is that kind of visible sign that radiates out in a way that gives a personal and public witness to our unity. The fact that it just sits here is not unimportant. And when I sit in it, I do feel that importance. I always think of the ceremony when they walk the bishop to the cathedral. It's a very powerful moment, in that ceremony. When I sat down in this cathedral, I knew I was the bishop. This was now my home. Simple as that.
The cathedra or chair inside St. Joseph Cathedral represents Bishop Duca's authority as the Apostle of Baton Rouge.
I was born in Dallas, Texas, in 1952. There's 4 in our family. I'm the oldest. I have a sister about 1.5 years younger than me, Roseanne. I have a brother, James, who's 5 years younger than me, and then my sister, Irene, is 10 years younger. My father, Louis, his job was an estimator. He had only one full-time job his whole life, and he would do, for an oil refinery equipment maker, he would estimate the jobs when they came in. He did the bids, and then that's what he did. When my parents died, I had a chance to look at some of the old checkbooks my father had. And I can't believe he raised 4 kids on that little paycheck that came in So we had a very simple life. Well, we were solid middle class, but certainly didn't have anything extra. But I was happy. I remember the day my dad brought home this big hunk of bologna. I'd never seen bologna in a hunk. And he put it on the grill, and he barbecued it like it was prime, now I would say prime rib. And he put it on the table, and we sliced it. And I thought I was in heaven. I wonder if everybody else is as rich as we are, So I had a very happy life. My mom and dad were true Catholics, in the best sense of the word. Every Sunday at Mass, we went to Catholic schools. Everything we did was practically part of the Catholic Church. Even though I was growing up in a city, Dallas, that had a very small Catholic population, I would never have known that because my life was somewhat insular within that cocoon of the church. And I began to think about being a priest in that context. The earliest I have is being at Mass one day, because we went to Mass every day in Catholic schools, and not always attentive as a kid. And I was looking at the altar, watching the priest, and a thought came into my mind, I could do that. Now that was it. That was kind of like the first, now I call it a grace, that God got my mind turned in a little bit towards that direction. And after that, I just kept continuing to think about it and even imagine what it might be to be a priest. And it just kept growing in my heart. I went in after high school when I was 18 and went 8 years of seminary at the University of Dallas at Holy Trinity Seminary.
On the 29th of April, 1978, in Dallas, Texas, Michael Duca was ordained to the priesthood.
I stayed at the rectory that night in order to give myself some time to pray. And I remember just being at peace, that this was a good thing. I was excited about it. I couldn't wait to get started. The day of the ordination, everything just went so perfectly, the choir, the music. I don't know if I really believed I was a priest. I mean, I knew it. I knew I was a priest. But it wasn't until the next day when I stood behind the altar with my pastor next to me that I really said, oh, this is real. First assignment was 3 years, my second was 3 years. My last one was 9 months, because in the middle of that assignment, I was called and said I was not going to become a pastor. I was going to become the vocation director of the diocese and campus minister at Southern Methodist University. SMU was a great assignment for me. About 25% of the Catholic campus was 20 to 25% was Catholic. We had a very large worshiping community on campus. Then I was asked to go study canon law for 2 years. And so I went and studied canon law for 2 years. expecting I'd come back, work in the chancery, and be a pastor. But that didn't happen. I came back, and the bishop said, no, we want to make you rector of our seminary. Holy Trinity Seminary, where I went originally, was 8 years, was now a college and pre-theology seminary. And so I became rector of the seminary and served there for 12 years. You know, I always say that my life was not going any way the way I wanted it to or thought it would. I say this all the time. I thought I would be an associate for 3 or 4 years, then I'd be a pastor for 4 or 5 assignments, and then I'd die. I was happy with that. But I wasn't a pastor at this time. My life was going like this. I said, what's going on here? But when I became rector of a seminary, it's like that string got pulled tight. Because now I can see the campus ministry, the parish work, the vocation work, all began to, and the higher education all blended into being, God was preparing me.
On April 1st, 2008, Michael Duca was appointed the Bishop of Shreveport by Pope Benedict XVI. Years later, in 2018, Bishop Duca was appointed the 6th Bishop of the Diocese of Baton Rouge by Pope Francis.
You have to understand something. It was hard for me to leave Dallas. It was hard for me to leave Texas. Remember, I was born and raised a Texan. No, I grew up knowing I was Catholic, Italian, Texan, and American, okay, kind of in that order. The most difficult thing was that when I had to get a driver's license, I handed in my Texas driver's license, and they handed me a Louisiana driver's license. And I said, can I have that back? She said, no, she cut it in half. I almost like she did it on purpose, you know, like, it was hard to leave Dallas because that's where my family was, my support systems, my friends, but the people's love and support. When you get there, what you understand, once you move even as an associate pastor, that the people are all kind of the same everywhere. They're all good Catholics, and you have a community, a common language that immediately connects you to them. And so that transition was easy.
In the years since becoming bishop, Bishop Duca has worked hard to lead the people of Baton Rouge as their chief shepherd.
Well, my motto, Hope in the Lord, came because at the time I was named a bishop first. I was thinking hard about the fact that we're losing hope as a people, all the things that trouble us. So my hope, first of all, for Baton Rouge, every place I go, I really want us to have a more hopeful nature. And so for Baton Rouge, and for all the church, is for us to hope in the Lord. That is, we have so many things that bombard us from without, that institutions that seem to be failing us. We seem to be throwing up our hands saying, there's no answer, what are we going to do? I said, we have the answer. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. If we can bring to those discussions our true faith and the teachings of Jesus Christ in terms of respecting of people and stepping out in faith and being willing to sacrifice and love, those things that can actually truly recreate the world, we can change the conversation. Don't hope in the world, hope in Jesus Christ and bring that joy, as some Pope Francis, the joy of the gospel to the world. That's our salt, that's our seasoning. And if we don't speak it out, the world's going to be poor for it. So that's my hope for the people of Baton Rouge, that we rediscover that sense of evangelism, that sense of mission to go out and be Christ for others.